Welcome to the Ben and Tony podcast, and today we have Fabrizio Rinaldi. Sitting as the global head of digital innovation at iconic fashion brand Versace, Fabrizio has a pretty interesting and fun job. But what really drives him comes from a fascinating set of interests, most prominently sport, where Fabrizio has taken lessons from football, surfing, and MMA to directly apply to his career. We talked about him becoming a father and the surprising role Will Smith played, his experiences moving around the world at a young age, and also trends in media and entertainment and how he thinks large companies can approach digital transformation in the modern world. You will learn a lot from this and hope you enjoy the episode.
And we're very, very excited to be sponsored by the Making Lemonade Fund, Gen Z's fastest growing fundraiser, supporting COVID 19 relief, pediatric cancer, and a bunch of other great causes. Get behind them over at makinglemonadefund.com and sponsor Made by our very own Jesse K.
Welcome to Fabrizio Rinaldi. Fabrizio is originally from Italy. Thank you for being here, Fabrizio. And he's grown up, and a big part of his life has always been sports. At one point, he was a professional footballer, big surfer, longboarder. And when he got into the world of marketing, he started working at a place that was kind of one of the pioneers of influencer marketing, a startup back in 2009. Since then, he spent many years across different agencies like Wunderman, Ogilvy, then eventually became the head of digital marketing globally for Versace. And now that role has evolved a bit, and he's doing digital content, digital innovation at Versace. So welcome, Fabrizio. And can you explain to us, like, what are you doing right now? What is digital innovation? How does it work with Versace? And what are you up to these days?
Tough question, actually, to start with. Um, I define digital innovation as a path where I'm trying to introduce either new technologies, either new processes, or even people and mindset that come with the people to incentivize change as much as possible in the company. This doesn't mean that wherever you go and you're doing digital innovation, you'll find problems, but in 99% of cases, this might be the case. So identifying those problems and trying to creatively think of solutions that actually bring added value in terms of new business opportunities or huge cost savings, everything, and probably the right driver for that is definitely technology and digital, and hence the word digital before the word innovation. But basically, it's stimulating change within the company.
And I would imagine, as a fashion brand like Versace, there's a lot about that industry that's changing in the world right now with regards. I mean, we could talk about this for hours with regards to, I don't know, all the different technologies that are affecting fashion right now. So you must have a very interesting front row seat to stuff that's happening in the fashion industry.
Yes, definitely. The good perk, I think, of working for a brand like Versace is that you then get also the opportunity to talk to people that are coming from other industries, maybe also incentivized by the fact that you've got the Versace badge on
Yeah,
your head and it's got such a huge halo. You get the opportunity to talk with so many people about what's happening in the digital world that's, I think, beyond the fashion world that you can actually
totally.
bring back to fashion. So, blockchain is affecting fashion, 3D and virtual gaming is going to affect fashion dramatically. I've got some examples of actually both. Um, it is an interesting time, to be honest. And even the pandemic, in the way we lived it in the fashion world, if it wasn't for the backlash, if you want, in the retail space, where many fashion brands, of course, rely so much in tourism, um, I think on the other side, it's been a huge opportunity for us to actually push forward so many projects that otherwise would have been put a bit on in a second row in terms of priority. And so this acceleration really helped us fast forward
Yeah,
for a couple of years, I think, within 1 year. So fast tracking projects that really brought that added value through digital.
amazing. I mean,
That's awesome. And
yeah,
yeah, no, I was going to say, one thing that seems really kind of top of mind for fashion right now as well is on sustainability. So you actually are kind of at front row of changing the way that the impact that your company has on the world. So does that come under your scope? And if so, well, how do you think about that?
It's not directly under my scope. But as I like saying with the person that's in charge of sustainability within the company, uh, there's no innovation nowadays or sustainability, anything that sits under a sustainability pillar that's an added value that doesn't require technology or anything on a digital instrument. So they really go hand in hand at the moment. Whether you're introducing, I don't know, a new tool to approve documents and sign documents digitally, reducing the paper footprint and ink footprint. Uh, Either you're transforming the production process by introducing a new means of prototyping, reducing the number of samples you need to produce, reducing the number of prototypes you need to produce. All of that is all going towards the direction of producing sustainability. So I think it's a nice consequence of any digital innovation. Therefore, they definitely go hand in hand.
It's amazing. It's funny because we're gonna go to the first transitional moment in your life right now, and I don't know if fashion's been a theme for your life. Sounds like maybe not, because to start off with, could you tell us about the big transition of the role of sports in your life, and Muay Thai and football, and how that's affected your life?
Yeah, so I've always been a person. So coming from the football sport as a sport, it's only always been my main sport. I was the captain of my team. I always was the younger um, kind of player within the team itself. So always had a lot of responsibility on me, but also the great ability to be able to distribute competence and, if you want, also responsibility throughout the entire team. And it's really, you know, when people say and use this metaphor in the business world, being a team player is really something that's an added value, I think, within the company world. Um, Thing that I realized later on, and actually more recently in life, is that there's instances in which you actually don't find yourself with a team, and it's a tough moment. Of course, if you're used to relying on, you know, you're not used to relying only on your energy, because of course, if you're tired in 90 minutes, let's talk about a football game or a basketball game. Basketball is a bit more, of course, you're five players, so it's really easier to see if you're tired and you get changed more quickly. But in football, sometimes you just have to go push through it. And maybe out of 11 players, if there's one that's walking and not running, you see that even in professional footballers nowadays, you don't really notice that in out of 90 minutes. Um, Instead, when you're relying on your resources, which happens when you're one of those sports where you have to play by yourself, you can't afford that. And so the big shift in terms of sports that happened in my life, I think happened first when I started surfing, because I realized I was by myself in the ocean, and my life, without being too exaggerate, but I had a few injuries and a few cuts in my head anyway. Um, your life is actually depending on yourself, on how responsible you are, on how you read the ocean, on how good you are, and how lucky you can be. So that's I think the turning point has been the transition between when I stopped playing football professionally and I started dedicating entirely at university at studying and other things, of course, but studying mainly. And the next transition was definitely when I started surfing in the years of university, because I realized how much that was true. And also surf was a great metaphor for life, because of course there's the waves that they're unpredictable, the fact that you can surf them. So sometimes you have to go with the flow. And I'm not without using too many, way of saying that are quite common, but it is true. Like life is definitely something that has to be lived for what it is. And what the surfing community gave to me was this appreciation of how life was simpler than you thought. You know, Occam's razor, which says that the simplest answer is actually the most correct normally in most cases. And that's the same thing with the problems in life. So that really helped me. And then I always, kept going to the gym, getting bored, not seeing my body really change, because my physical DNA doesn't allow for any big change anyway. Um, and so I started wanting, of course, I kept playing football of course, in an amateurish kind of way. Even when we met, when we were back in England, I was playing at an eight-a-side team. But then I realized while I was doing this thing at the gym and was getting quite bored, I realized I need something new. And so one of the other things that come with the sports is the ability to improve your body by challenging it to get out of your comfort zone. And so this very basic concept that's very valuable in the sports world, because of course you can only improve your body shape, your stamina, uh, wherever you want to improve, only by pushing your limits to the next level. And so I started doing CrossFit. I started doing boxing. And now, after a couple of years, I think I was 30, but it was 4 or 5 years ago, I realized that I really liked MMA, the entertainment side of it. And I said to myself, what's the most fundamental combat sport and most complete combat sports at the moment in the world, if you exclude MMA, which is of course mixed martial arts, so it's a bit of everything. And so I looked into Muay Thai and I really loved. It's known as the art of eight limbs because you basically are. It's like kickboxing. You punch, you kick, but you also use knees and elbows. And so they're also very, very good and powerful tool in terms of street fighting in case you ever get involved in one. And so since I was becoming a father, I said probably I should build a bit my confidence in this sense. And I've never done combat sports in my life. So let's push the limit and let's go to the next one and let's see what happens. And that's where I discovered, so many useful things, such as how much precision can beat power and timing can beat speed. Like that's a saying that you have in combat sports that's so important. And I really understood once you fight, even when you're doing sparring, you understand that saying, you understand what it means. And bringing that to the business world, I think it's given me so much confidence in myself, in the sense that I can walk with a certain level of self-confidence, which I had before, but it was fake. Like it's a whole different thing to know that you can defend yourself from a average, risky situation, and walking as a proud lion, rather than being sort of, who knows what happens if this person comes closer to me and so on. So knowing what to do.
That's completely fascinating. I mean, I love all of the lessons that you've kind of drawn from the sports world and put them into, your leadership in Versace. So, what was it like? Because obviously you just spoke about that movement from kind of, towards becoming a proud lion and being able to walk in that way and, be able to hold yourself and know that you can hold yourself and feel grounded in doing so. But at some point when you first turned up to a Muay Thai lesson, I presume there was that moment of, okay, what am I going to do here? How am I going to get through this? What was that kind of experience like?
I think like any moment in which you're out of your comfort zone, there's this saying that I don't know if it exists, but this is what I say to my friends to describe the feeling that I have sometimes in life. You have to be able to keep your breath underwater for a while. That uncomfortable situation is going to end at one point. And so keeping calm and being able to wait for, the wipeout to end, to back to the surfing, and swimming back up at the right moment is crucial. So I think the key there is not panicking, and the feelings you have is definitely panic, of course, because you're out of your comfort zone. You don't know what's going to happen. The same reason why you're afraid of the dark. You don't know what could be there. And so that's why light helps you. And I think getting that confidence in this sense, it's sort of having a flashlight with you and being able to starting to see slowly and slowly more things and being less scared of it. Of course there's risks, but in combat sports and in martial arts, in gyms in general, there's fewer fights that there are on the street. And normally the people that normally you'd find in a fight on the street have never punched a person in their life. because they're not aware of the consequences that a punch can have. And so what people would think would be scary and risky within a gym, it's not absolutely like that. Actually, if you're in a good gym, which is 90% of the cases, people that don't have control, which is another thing you learn under pressure, they're normally kicked out. There's no space for that kind of attitude in the gym. And so you're there to learn, you're there to respect, which is the base, of course, of any martial art, and which is another wonderful thing that I think you can get from that sport. But you're there to learn. And the thing that I learned the most, I think, was also getting comfortable under pressure, which is a strange thing. Like they teach you, the first thing they teach you is to shell yourself and get used to being punched. So you can always revert back to your comfort zone, which is your shelling. And once you've got that, then you start building on top all the rest. And so having that, knowing that you've got always that place to go, even when under pressure, is something that changes your life. And I think bring it again, it's not a process you do voluntarily, of course, because these are all realizations, epiphanies you have in the process. But only when you find yourself talking, like in this situation, you realize how many things you actually bring back to life.
Yeah, this seems so like holistic and cathartic, right? I think I feel like we've gone through in some ways, your life story through the lens of sport. You know, you were this football player, you know, the captain, presumably, you know, of your team when you were younger, like managing a group of, you know, wild 11 dudes. Then you started becoming this sort of meditative surfer who's kind of going with the flow. And then now you've taken that to the next level with Muay Thai and combat sports. And I love how it's not just been about the sport. It's been about like the very, very deep life lessons that come from each of these different moments, which that's really fascinating, honestly. I've actually never heard anyone probably describe sport that way. And also the fact that you've gone through 3 different ones. It's not like you're a lifelong footballer, you talk about that. It's like the diversity in your experiences also adds a diversity of lessons that you've learned.
Yeah, there's a tendency when you start with a sport, you stick to it, of course, because it becomes the thing you're good at doing. And to be honest, there's been so many times in the gym or while doing CrossFit that I couldn't match other people in terms of strength or endurance. And I was thinking, I wish I was on a football field showing everyone who I am. Because that's your key skill, your core skill.
A
But
lesson in
then
humility.
exactly. But then I mentioned playing football still in the UK because actually while I was doing CrossFit and then playing football, I find myself a stronger player at 30-year-old than I was when I was 18. More dynamic, more energetic, stronger, because basically cross-referencing and cross-contaminating from sports is something that's becoming a trend right now. And it's something that's definitely, when you see mixed martial arts, it's exactly that. It's getting the best from every single combat sport and putting them into a cage. For me, in a form of art, for many people, entertainment, for many other people, just violence, sheer violence. But that's basically it. I think that's the key. It's getting out of your comfort zone, learning new skills, bringing them back, and see how actually you improve also your core abilities with it. And so now I'm 34. I've never been more, and I'm still, in this discovery process and improving. I haven't got a better body than when I was 18, of course, but I'm just stronger just because the core is there, like the foundation, which no one ever worked on, because when you do football back then, even stretching was done the wrong way. Like you do dynamic stretching before you start doing the activity, and then you do static stretching either after or the day after, ideally. While in my days, we used to do static stretching before, which means overstretch your muscles that are cold. Then you would get your muscles destroyed during the sport itself, and you wouldn't have time for recovery. And recovery is another topic that I would like to talk about, because one other key to good training is not to kill yourself 100% 2 times, 3 times a week. To really improve yourself, you have to push yourself to a point where you're not getting really tired and you can still train the day after. So there's no point in going to the gym and killing someone else or getting hit by someone to the point that the day after you can't train again, because then you've got less hours in the gym. So if you add together the hours you manage to get into the gym, whatever sport you're doing, by training, say 60-50% of your potential and focusing on the muscles that your areas you have to focus on that day, that's the trick. So the soreness, yes, a bit, but not to the point that you're basically you can't walk. And
Totally.
so
That's so interesting, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why people pick up, a New Year's resolution, and then it's what typically dropped by day 18, because I think they hit it so hard they don't realize that the recovery and just being able to be consistent about it is one of the things that's most important. And one of the things that you spoke about at the very beginning when you were saying, okay, I wanted to look into MMA, I thought the world of entertainment was starting to get really interesting, and I wanted to know what sport was it, and you found Muay Thai through that. Um, a lot of the principles that you've spoke about that you've taken from sport have been very kind of pure, in that they're very foundational, they're very fundamental, and they can be pretty widely applied to leadership, business, life, parenting, presumably as well. Um, I wonder if you like what your thoughts are on, with the rise of kind of Fight Island in Dubai, Conor McGregor as a franchise, how you think people can ensure that they still get that kind of pure, those pure lessons out of something like this, or if the actual entertainment industry taking it in might contaminate it.
it is definitely contaminating it. So if you look at the two biggest franchises at the moment, you got one championship on the Asian side, and then you got the UFC on in the States. They're not comparable because one championship has not only martial arts, they still have Muay Thai. I believe they have K1 kickboxing, um, and so it's a bit more um, wide in terms of coverage, in terms of the types of sport. But if you take the CEO of one championship, I think his name is Yod Chai. He's a great entrepreneur. He used to be a martial artist. He's done all the sports. He's done jiu-jitsu. He's done kickboxing. He's done Muay Thai. And he's the one that wants that play that calling them players, fighters get on the ring with values, and he's the one pushing for the values. Dana White on the other side, he's the CEO of the UFC. He's the one pushing for entertainment. So he's really the one who's not telling off a fighter if he's not behaved properly doing weigh-ins or doing the face-offs. He doesn't care. Actually, that gets him excited.
Yeah.
On the other side, look at the one championship matches. If anyone gets the chance to, there's silent. There's entertainment in the sense that there's the pure art of combat sports. There's nothing else. There's not the whole trash talking and so on. So when I say it's dangerous, I say that there's and this is something that's one of the reasons I got away from football, is because entertainment is way more important than the substance of a player at one point going forward. So I wanted to have fun and not entertain, which are two different things. One thing I realized lately is that there's specific type, going back on the fighting kind of topic, there's two types of fighters nowadays. There's the fighter that's the athlete, and he's doing it to become the best in his sport because that's all he knows. So he's the Olympian, he's the gold medalist. He's the one who's achieved it all, and then becomes the best in that specific sport. So think of people like Lomachenko. He's a boxer. He's very well rounded as a boxer, and very well known. Think of Giorgio Petrosian as a kickboxer. I actually train with him, and so he's the world champion of kickboxing. And he's Armenian, born in Armenia, but with half Italian. So he moved to Italy when he was, I think, 8-9 years old. And when you train with him, you realize that you work on the basics. There's no talking. There's no entertainment side of things. He's not the flashy dude you would expect him to be, even though he's the best in the world, and he's been so for the past 15 years. It's just the humblest person in the world, doing what he loves and nothing else. He hasn't got a social media manager managing his social channels. He posts what he wants. He hasn't got pressure from his sponsors to do anything. He's not selling his soul to any sponsor. He's sticking with the same ones, and that's it. It's a very simple way, and he's happy with what he has, which is, to him, his goal is not to make money, but to become the best at his sport. And then you have other people like the one you mentioned, for instance, Conor McGregor, which I really respect and love as an athlete, but on an entertainment point of view, on the show business point of view, that's where I'm not really interested, and I start getting bored, to be honest. So you've seen the huge fight between him and the Dagestani Khabib Nurmagomedov. That's the exact example of two different people, completely different worlds that clashed, and luckily the right one won.
Yeah, and also you have the biggest boxing pay-per-views in the world being Logan Paul versus KSI, to YouTubers, and now Logan Paul is fighting Floyd Mayweather and stuff. So I think these things might coexist for a while. And also, I think what's interesting is that, yeah, like what I think it's cultural as well. You know, it's like it's very like Logan Paul versus Floyd Mayweather is very Hollywood, right? One championship is much more about like the historical like role that MMA has played in Thailand or just in Asia in general, where there's less of like a Hollywood vibe there. And I think those things will coexist.
Yeah, they definitely will. And again, the fact that it works doesn't mean it's morally, or, you know, you had Big Brothers for the past 30 years. No one's complained.
Yeah.
It's the most trashy thing you can think of. And it's entertainment, it's creating money, and it's still going on. So again, it's this. They're two different worlds. I'm not saying that definitely one of the two is gonna win or not against the other. It's just that they're gonna coexist, as you said. Yeah.
That's so fascinating. I'd love to jump about, you spoke about when you became a father. What was that like, and how did you take some of these principles into being a father?
Yeah. So for many people, being a father is something that happens, depending on, I guess, I don't know how many risks you want to take and if you're in my case, I'm very cynical in terms of I never felt the urge to become a father, therefore always use protections.
So sorry, just never throughout your life you had no strong desire. Like if I had met you 10 years ago and I said, Fabrizio, like, would you want to become a dad? You would have said, no, I don't. No. It's not really interesting to me at all. Okay.
I couldn't even foresee that because it wasn't really part of. I was a very self-centered person, like everybody is at 20-year-old. You don't think about becoming a father. Maybe few people do, but I think it's more a prerogative of women to say one day I would like to become a mother. Just because the emotional involvement is different, and the sense of achievement is probably also different. At least culturally, that's how it's brought to you. So the feeling was, I'm not ready yet. We even had a lot of arguments with my wife until we got to the point that we even had a really big crisis due to the fact that I didn't feel ready and she was. She's also 3 years older than me, so bear in mind there's the biological clock that starts ticking for them. And then something strange happened. So it was basically 2014, and I think we did this wonderful trip in Japan. And coming back from Japan, I watched a movie on the plane on our way back, and it was Collateral Beauty. That's the movie with Will Smith. And by the way, there he's an entrepreneur. He's a startupper in the movie. And the weird story about the movie, without saying anything about the plot, is just basically the key is a father losing his daughter. And by seeing the sheer pain excruciating pain that Will Smith was living in that moment, or at least he was interpreting in that moment, I somehow realized the huge joy that having a child might be in your life. It's really strange, but it came out of a movie.
Wow, a
Shout
film.
out to Will Smith
And
for convincing you to become a father.
did you name your son Will or?
No. He's called Daniel. And so that basically, ticked into my head, and then it happened. And I started from when my wife started becoming pregnant. Well, when she got pregnant, I started thinking, what kind of father will I be? And you start asking yourself all those questions. And
Big questions.
I started reading so many books about science, not only because I love science, but also because I wanted to refresh my memory about everything about the world, because I wanted to be able to give him answers to every single question he had. And then a friend of mine just broke it all to me in the best way possible. He broke it down by saying, reminding me that my role is not to put knowledge into his head, but to put someone in the world to the point that he can walk by himself. And therefore, rather than filling him of information, probably the key skill I should be focusing on giving him is curiosity. And so that also is something else that I brought, I think, into the business world and the way I work, is trying to inspire this sort of curiosity all the time, rather than just trying to throw information at people. So I think that's a life-changing moment. So many reasons, but this is the path that got me there. And also, of course, once you become father, there's the whole training process and getting out of your comfort zone completely. And the most important thing is that you stop being self-centered, but you start thinking in the eyes of someone else's life, which is a huge responsibility and pressure, but then an amazing joy.
And what you described about like the professional applications, would you describe it like you became slightly more perhaps empathetic when it came to like a workplace setting, where knowing that you had not just yourself to think about, were you able to better translate empathy into like a working environment?
I don't know if it's empathy, because I'm probably the less empathetic person in the world, according to my wife. But what I definitely brought there was a certain level of calm and assertiveness. Actually, before my child, I should have mentioned the dog.
Training wheels to a child, right?
Once you have a dog,
This one's
you actually realize, regardless of the size of the dog, you'd probably realize that people that have the smallest dogs are the less behaved dogs. The reason for that is because people tend to be less incisive, less strong, less dominant towards smaller dogs. Therefore, they become the dominance, the alpha in the pack. They become the alpha. And so the concept of alpha is which isn't the dominance in the strengths point of view, but it's a dominance in terms of being calm and assertive. These two characteristics, I think, define an alpha leader, whether it's in the animal world, whether it's across animal world, so between me and the dog, my wife and the dog, but also in the world of business. So calm and assertiveness, which is also something that I brought with my child, and I think I inevitably brought back to in the office in terms of skill, is something that gave me so much of a leverage and additional leverage, because of course people tend to trust less the crazy lion in the pack, Scar in The Lion King. He's less reliable, and then people end up trusting more the calm and assertive one, which is the one who ends up being the most dominant, just because he the halo behind him is bigger than what you would think.
And it sounds like a combination of the sports lessons with the fatherhood lessons that make you feel like you're becoming a better calm lion each day that goes by.
Kind of, yeah. And even though I don't know why I mentioned lion, because it's not even within my favorite animals. Like I like pandas, so.
Oh, you do? Okay.
And it's the least alpha animal you can find in the world.
Cuddly, cute pandas.
Well, I mean, if you can handle blubbering child screaming because it needs its nappy changing, presumably you can handle a board meeting.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, tricks that are very simple. You don't really have to talk much, and actually, the less you talk, the better. And let your team talk. Um, but listen, like the ability to listen, and that's one of the mind shifting thing that happened in my life was just moving from the self-centered, always talkative person that I was also back in the UK. Anthony might remember I was very extrovert in that sense, and then started to actually become more uh, think more through things before acting, which again you get through time anyway. You don't get it necessarily by a child or a specific sport.
This might be a good time then to talk about the transition of you moving, right? So it sounds like, throughout your life, you've lived in what, 5 European countries? What was the moment of transition when it came to your, I guess, geographic movement? How did that affect you?
I think it defined my personality more than anything else. So I was lucky enough to live across Europe. I was born in Luxembourg. For who doesn't know, it's a small country in the center of Europe that was basically one of the founding countries, together with the Netherlands and Belgium, of what is now known as the European Union. So a great country to be born in. Very cold, not much to do. We stayed there 3 years, then moved to London for another almost 3 years. We actually lived in the same road where the ex-prime minister used to live. So it was, I think back then it was a Thatcher. I was too small. And the fun thing about that is that I used to speak English with a French accent when we moved in London, and I learned the language in 6 months. After that, we went to Paris, where I was in an Italian school, so I started Italian. My family is Italian, by the way. They're from Naples. So then we moved back to Naples, where we stayed 8 years, then another city named Ancona, then Bologna, then other 2 cities, then Rome, and then back to London in 2014 with my wife and so on. And I think the reason why I say that traveling, and by when I say traveling is living abroad, is definitely a founding element of my personality, is because having changed friendships so much and so quickly in a time in which you couldn't really keep in touch, if not with letters, but those would be a couple of years, no more. I had to force myself into being a person that's really likable, in terms of without many edges at the beginning, and a person who gives it all at the beginning. So I couldn't be really getting into a class and being shy, or respectful, yes, but not shy. It would have been counterproductive in my case. And then the other instance would have been, so the keyword is integration here. And I think to integrate yourself, you have to understand part of the culture. And that really comes down to having same and shared interests. And so curiosity moved me in those days to try to understand, what people would be up for. And also it's hard to, it's unlucky, because when we moved to London, I was in an international school with, Arabs, Americans, French, Chinese, Japanese. So it was really hard to find one culture to actually connect with.
Yeah.
I just know the ones that really struggled with integrating at the beginning. But then it basically came to me that, giving yourself 100% to the other person, even when we're a child, is the key to unlocking and having them open up towards you. So I think that's the key thing that I brought into my life, that I think I use at any time, and I probably have with people, to the point that it becomes strange and dodgy, specific in certain cultures. For someone to come at you and say, hey, let's have a drink this afternoon, maybe we just met. And the reason I'm asking that is because I'm genuinely curious to know what you do in your life, and see if there's anything interesting that you can bring home. Talking about, pushing the boundaries and moving outside the comfort zone. So in many instances it's awkward. In many instances you get no's, but you get used to those no's, and then the yeses, they're the ones who change your life or you change their lives. So it's I think that's the key lesson that I got from there. It's hard to explain, and it comes down to personality. So I don't really expect people to necessarily share it or do the same thing. I wouldn't recommend that, because it's you know, those no's can hurt, of course. But then, you know, bringing that into the business, it means getting used to failure, which is also something from sports. So really, life is a lesson, whatever you live it in, whatever direction you're taking it from.
I love that. And one thing that I picked up on earlier was that you said, you know, it's about living in countries, not just traveling. It's definitely something that I've shared. You know, when I've been traveling and kind of zipping around week to week across somewhere, I've come out of it when I was younger and I've been like, okay, wow, I've really seen the world. But it wasn't until I really moved countries twice that I actually felt like I started to understand different cultures properly and wasn't kind of, you know, a fly on the wall looking at the culture, but actually was immersing myself within it. Yeah, curious if you share the same kind of sentiment on that.
Well, have you been into Japan?
I've never been to Japan, no.
I think
I
there's
think
there's
Anthony, you
no
have, right?
other.
Yeah, I used to live in Japan when I was a kid.
I think
Yeah.
whenever you in the world, there isn't another place. Well, there are many, but in terms of civilized, advanced, technologically advanced places, there isn't anything on Earth that's comparable to Japan, unless you go to Mars. Which so there's no going into another planet as much as going to Japan. Because there you're really clashing with a completely different culture. As an Italian, like generally I define myself more Italian than anything else. Um, that's where you understand the difference of cultures, because that's where personal space becomes so important, respect, uh, let's say also outdated rules that really they themselves struggle to live with, but they just accept because that's how they are. Um, and so there's so much of Japan that I always liked, because watching animes and reading mangas always been in top of my head as fascinating. And I still, this is it's still the country we keep saying that's the one we have to go back to as soon as everything opens back again. um, that's the country that's surprised me the most in terms of understanding how different it is. And so that's the one in which if you don't live there and you're just a tourist, you'll never understand it. Even if you study it from home, like it's completely different. Even asking for information on the streets, it's an adventure. Exchanging business cards, it's a whole new experience.
And I imagine what's interesting with this too is that considering that your role now, I just realized you're in a global role, right? Like you're responsible for what Versace is doing globally. That you're not just talking about what you should do for Italian customers. It's like you need to be very culturally aware because I mean, if I'm not mistaken, like a lot of Versace's, I don't know where all the revenue comes from, but a big part of it is Asia. My understanding is like China's the biggest luxury market in the world right now. So you have to be aware of this kind of stuff. So you can't just be someone that doesn't have that cultural background because it would make you be able to do your job.
Yeah, I think it's just sensitivity towards the fact that there's different cultures. There's fashion brands who have made big mistakes in the past couple of years,
Yeah, especially in China.
especially in China. Um, and this is actually something that I really managed to get my hands really deep in when we met when I worked in Ogilvy, because the role there was EMEA, and it was activation. We were basically building a strategy, content, and activation for the 21 markets in Europe. And so that's where you realize whenever you create a piece of content and you have to localize it, one thing is transcreate, another thing is to localize. To localize means translating that feeling, emotion into what it means in that country. And sometimes it means something completely different. If you're localizing in Germany, you have to, well, first of all, in the automotive industry, you probably know, Anthony, you have to keep in mind so many of these disclaimers that get onto the video. So you end up having the more disclaimers than video itself. If you're localizing for the South European countries, it's easier. They tend to be much more one like the other. The French definitely don't like certain things to be talked about. And so it starts becoming a hard job, and having the sensitivity to understand that you can't really force specific things into the countries and ways of doing and working into the countries is really important. And I actually interviewed a few years ago for a role in Huawei, the Chinese mobile phone manufacturer, technology producer. And I immediately realized that there was a huge cultural clash, and that wasn't a role that would have been a good fit for me. I could see it immediately in the eyes of the recruiters and the questions that they were asking. And you could immediately see that they were expecting me to work in a way that isn't really in my DNA, which you could still change if it's worth it. But I think for a salary is never worth your soul in certain cases.
I remember when you and I used to work together, I feel like half of our job was being like diplomats across the different countries that we were working with.
Yes. Easier. Easier position to be about diplomats in that case. There aren't big clashes. There isn't any like big crisis to manage like that. But there's definitely situations in which you're pissing off people, and then you have to build back the relationships and make people understand that's not what you meant and things like that. So diplomacy, I think, it has to come with any job, really. But then I realized there's certain companies, because we're used to startups and talking about startups, but let's not forget that there's so many companies in the world, in Italy especially, that are family-led businesses.
Yeah.
And those are the places where you find everything depends on the mood of the business owner. And there's no diplomacy there. There's no rights. Sometimes HR isn't something that really exists. And so sometimes we really forget the luxury we have in working in companies. In your case, where you're incentivized to build bridges rather than walls and things like that. I don't know, Ben, your experience, what has it been in the past years?
Yeah, I'm in digital transformation as well. So I work for an accelerator out here, working with large corporates. So it's pretty similar space.
So I think that's an environment in which we can thrive, because there's all the soil, the ground has been laid down for us to work as better as possible. If you try to do digital transformation in a family-led brand, unless you're the son of the family of the business owner, it's just a nightmare. I can even imagine.
And this is all, I mean, I can't imagine someone who's more kind of, in terms of your personality and experiences in life, more well positioned to be, leading the charge in innovation. You've been through so much change, and you've tried so many things for yourself and your personal pursuits. And of course, you've got a podcast on this, and you write a blog on this. So yeah, tell us about Innovation Waves.
So Innovation Waves used to be called Social Media Surfer.
Oh,
so
nice.
It changed with the topic that basically became defining of my career. It wasn't a podcast; it was just a blog, and I just converted it. I think during the lockdown, thinking that I should probably get back into writing my thoughts down on specific subjects that, of course, have to do with innovation. The concept of waves, I think I expressed it before, but basically it's a bit an emblem of life itself. It's this evolution of movement rather than just a certain spike. That's how I see innovation itself. It's not an epiphany. It's something that happens slowly, builds gradually, can crush on you, or can actually make you, if you surf it, get you to where you want to get. So I think it was a good metaphor, and it occurred to me while on lockdown that I was having conversations with people and friends that I wish I could record, like this one we're having now.
Exactly.
Like it's.
Well, hey, good job it's recorded this time.
Did you remember, Professor? the button record.
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
No, and there were so many conversations I wish I had recorded. Therefore, I thought, okay, so maybe I should start doing a test and see how it goes. Luckily, you're in 2020, so you don't really have to need any kind of audio skill. If not, know where to buy a microphone, which is Amazon, and then know which app to have. And once you've done that, it's just it's an easy job. So I started asking my best friend to do the first pilot episode in Italian. Then I realized that, and we talked about sports. He's a basketball player, professional basketball player. And then I realized that actually, since I'm talking about innovation and most of my friends are actually across the world, probably I should be speaking in English. Therefore, because the objective is a personal discovery kind of path. Therefore, I'm not doing for anyone or any agenda. It's just what interests me in that moment becomes the topic of the next podcast episode. So for instance, the next one that I'm going to run is going to be with the CEO of a company that's sending satellites into space that will allow for internet connectivity across the world, not Elon Musk. And she's a rocket engineer, and she's based in Australia. And so space exploration is going to be a big chapter in the next couple of 3-4 episodes, I think. And so all the topics that interest in my life or I'm finding interesting in the moment are the ones that I want to deepen. Therefore, I get in touch with the people that I think could help me out with the episode. And sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 3. And it's literally just a self-discovery journey. I hope people like.
So where can people find that? Innovationwaves.com. What's the URL? Where do they find
Innovation? Yes, it's innovation. What's the line between the words? I don't know how to call it in English. Yeah, -waves.com. Then the podcast is everywhere. So Spotify as Innovation Waves, Google, iTunes, everywhere. Anchor.
Thank you, Fabrizio. We'll make sure people are aware of that. And thank you for being on the podcast. Actually, I'm just remembering, we have a couple of questions that are kind of now a tradition. Ben, would you like to ask the traditional question?
Yes, I will. Absolutely. So, Fabrizio, it's a bit of a curveball, but what is your favorite rom-com?
What is my favorite?
Rom-com, romantic comedy. This one really stumps me.
Well, the thing is, I don't have a favorite. I have the ones I know.
Okay.
Okay.
Just one that you like, right?
How I Met Your Mother.
Well, yeah, we can go for that.
That's not bad. Not bad.
Comedy?
Yes, I think we were meaning films, but it's all good. Yeah,
we films, but we did actually accept a book last.
No, There Comes Polly. Then, if it's a movie, it's There Comes Polly.
Along
Polly, whatever it is.
Actually, I've never seen that, but I hear it's good.
You have to.
I will. You just have to. I'm gonna get
I will. Okay, let's end the interview. I'll go watch it right now.
It's Jennifer Aniston, Adam Sandler, is it, or is it the one I'm confusing with?
Ben Stiller, right?
Is it Ben Stiller or Adam Sandler? I
thought it was Ben Stiller. I haven't seen it, but I have a big picture of like the poster in my head when it came out.
And then that amazing character. Sorry, I can't remember his name. The actor, the blonde one. He died recently.
Heath Ledger.
We've got Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Oh,
him,
yes. Probably,
yeah, he was so good. Sorry.
Yeah, and hey, the other one is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to yourself?
Knowing what you know now.
Younger. What age?
Okay, let's go for 18. That's a nice kind of on the cusp of adulthood.
Okay. So there aren't things that I've done that I regret. There's things that I haven't done that I regret not having done. And therefore, probably I would definitely tell him to concentrate more on studying and building relationships. Because in those years, I think I got distracted, at least for 1 year, exactly at 18-year-old when you mentioned. And the two things that I think that I didn't focus on, that I should have been at that age exactly, because I think there's things that you do in a certain age and you have to do in specific ages. That's definitely when you need to study. And so I basically lost one entire year. I could have easily got a degree a year before. So I got economics in 2009.
It's very sensible, very responsible. I love it.
Yeah, there's advice for your kid right now.
Yeah,
It's a father. No, it's a father in me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I thought you would have said something like "get into Muay Thai" earlier or something.
Yeah.
maybe not. Cool. Well,
I would have been the right person for that.
that's a good point. Great. Well, Fabrizio, thank you again.